Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be ranking every single new movie that I saw in the month of April. I only saw 6, and usually I would typically start off these videos by being like, here's all the movies I missed. I actually think I saw every movie that I wanted to see in the month of April. I think that there was the movie The Amateur with Rami Malek that looked like it was going to be an okay movie, but at the same time felt very derivative and kind of seemed like it was going to be very similar to other movies that have came out recently. So for the most part, there hasn't been a lot of movies that came out in April that I was really that interested to see. So I only saw 6, and if I'm being honest, aside from the number 1 spot, I think that all of these movies were like okay, not great. So let's dive into this, shall we? Alrighty, and coming in dead last place, and it does kind of kill me to put it here, but we have the Minecraft movie. I'm a really big fan of this movie. I kind of defended it a lot, and I still kind of stand by it. I think that for the most part, this movie is significantly better than it had any right to be. And I think that after having the first trailer and the second trailer and the third trailer and all of the promotional stuff for this movie being as bad as it was, for this movie to be solid, that's great. I think that in terms of plot, there is none, but that being said, there is a little bit of stories to be told in this movie. I think that for the most part, the main character, this little boy who goes to a new school, gets picked on for being somebody who's creative, and he goes into the world of Minecraft, and he actually learns that creativity is a beautiful thing and that it's something that can really help you flourish as a human being. I think that there's stuff there that works. They really tip the surface of something really interesting there. They just never really go anywhere deep enough with any of the characters, and I think that that's overall where this movie falls short. Jason Momoa's character also has a very interesting character arc there, where he's somebody who's alone, somebody who likes to harp on the past, and like somebody who like peaked in high school or whatever, but somebody who realizes that being alone and being like, oh, I'm too cool for other people is really a terrible toxic mindset, and that it's really just going to make you cripplingly lonely in the long run. So his character learning to make friends in this movie is also something that could have been really interesting if they had done anything to really flesh his characters out more. And it's one of those things where it's like, in a world where the writing is just slightly better, I could see this movie being a lot more memorable, a lot more entertaining. And even though I did like the final product, I still think that it could have been more, which is what leaves it at this number 6 spot. Alrighty, and in our number 5 spot, this is a movie I could get a lot of crap for, but we have the movie Warfare. Here's my big issue with this movie. They take something that is famously incredibly cinematic, which is war. There's a lot of war movies that are really cool. You go and it's a movie that like should be seen in cinemas, and this movie, in my opinion, does not benefit from seeing it in a cinema. I think that the sound design is absolutely incredible. I think that the acting performances are all around phenomenal, but it is something that is so uneventful, so uncinematic, and in that sense it does feel incredibly real, right? It feels like something that's more like a day in the life of a soldier, as opposed to, hey, here's this war movie. And I think that it can work for some people, and clearly for a lot of people it has, because every video I've made talking about why I dislike it, a lot of people have loved it. But in my opinion, it's an interesting experience, but it feels more like something you should see in a museum than in a movie theater. And I think that that's where my biggest problem with it is. You watch the trailers and it's like, okay, they're going from this building to that building to this building. They're scouting out this enemy. There's going to be this really interesting mission. And then you go and see this movie and it's just a bunch of guys sitting around a house. Somebody gets injured. They decide, okay, we need to call medic evac. And then another innocent person gets injured because they're trying to evacuate the first person, and then it ultimately ends with all of them just leaving in those evacs that are there to pick up the injured soldiers. And it's like, what was the point of them doing that? Like, nothing that happens in this movie has any clear like reason or motive as to why it is happening. Oh, sorry for the awkward cut there, but what I was saying is that in this movie, unlike a lot of other movies where it's like plot driven and there's character driven storytelling, there is none of that here. There aren't characters, because these are the real people. It feels incredibly real. The world feels incredibly lived in. Everything feels exactly like a memory should. And I do think that like there's beauty in that. The direction for that is interesting, but it's not something I want to see in theaters, and it's just something that overall is not for me. So whereas number 6 through number 2 on this list, I genuinely think that they're all about the same range. So I couldn't put this higher up on my list because it's just not a movie that I would recommend to people or I would go out of my way to see again. Alrighty, and coming in 4th place, we have the movie Hell of a Summer. This movie is co-directed by Finn Wolfhard, and part of the reason why I have this so low on this list is because I really had high expectations for this movie. I think that this movie looked incredibly cool. It has Fred Henchinger in it, and he's an incredible actor who I've really been falling in love with the last couple of years. And overall, the entire cast seems like it's made up of entirely people in their young 20s, and it seems like the entire production crew, the entire people directing it, like I mentioned, Finn Wolfhard co-directed this movie, all seemed like it was relatively young people. So I had very high expectations for this movie. I thought that it was going to feel incredibly fresh. And for the most part, the comedy, you can tell that it was jokes written by young people about young people. I think that it's one of the first movies in the last decade that has done a good job of making fun of young people and actually getting it right and doing it in a way that's tasteful. And it's making fun of the elements of people my age that should be getting made fun of, which I really do appreciate. I think that the dark humor in this movie is absolutely fantastic. I think that the gore is great. But overall, this is a movie that is a horror movie that takes place at a summer camp, and it does everything you would expect in a summer camp horror movie. I think that it doesn't bring anything really new or interesting to the table. I don't think any of the kills are that memorable, and I could see this being a movie that in 2 or 3 years from now, I just overall don't remember, and I think that that's part of the reason why I don't like this movie as much as some of the other things on this list. I thought that Finn Wolfhard directing this was going to be a really big deal because, like, he's somebody who's passionate about horror films. This man has starred in the It franchise. He's starred in the Ghostbusters franchise. He's starred in Stranger Things, which I understand that one's kind of more of like a sci-fi fantasy, but like some of the biggest horror franchises that have came out in the last, 10 years, not 10 years, arguably even longer than that, because both the original It movie and the original Ghostbusters movies way longer than that. Either way, he's been in some huge horror franchises. You can tell he's passionate about horror stuff. So seeing him making a horror movie got me really excited. And this movie just didn't quite meet my relatively high expectations. But that being said, it's not a bad movie. It's just very middle of the road. And coming in third place, this is one that the trailers looked so bad that I really did not want to watch this movie. In fact, I didn't intentionally watch this movie. With the movie The Drop, I went to go see, AMC does this thing called AMC Unseen, where you can go and see a movie on a Monday, and it'll be like a movie that's coming out later in the month. And it's like a fun little thing to do, with a little surprise screening, and it's usually a discounted ticket price. So I went to go see this with a friend. Overall, very low expectations when we both kind of had that realization of, oh crap, it's probably going to be the movie Drop. And then that poster came up and it was like, and today you're watching the movie Drop. And we started watching it, and my expectations for it are so low, so on the ground. I was expecting it to be really stupid. I think that anytime a movie deliberately tries to include cellular devices a lot, it really does a couple things. One, it dates the movie. For two, a lot of the like tension and a lot of the horror elements of this film happen when she's looking at a phone screen, and it's like harder to connect to that. I feel like part of the joy of going to the movie theaters is the escapism out of that. And so, you're taking a chance to like be off your phone screens for a little bit and get to live in like the real world surrounded by a bunch of people experiencing a movie. And when that movie takes you through being on a cell phone, the majority of the time, your expectations for it are a little low. And some of the stuff they're able to do with this movie did shock me a little bit. I think that the tension was actually really well done. I think that the first 8 elements here were actually really fantastic. And they did a really good job of kind of fleshing out the characters and all, that when this movie got to a point where it felt kind of cartoony, none of the characters felt out of place in this world, which I thought was really interesting. I think that the first 8 really helped elevate this film, because a lot of the really awkward, like secondhand embarrassment moments that aren't that scary feel a little more dialed up because of the added pressure of, this is a first date. This is somebody who she really wants to make a good first impression on. And then later in the movie, as it's spoiled in the trailers, she has to try to like kill him. And then they have a couple of moments where, like, towards the end of this movie, where you can tell throughout this date they've gotten to know each other enough that they can now read each other relatively well, and they're able to work together to kind of solve the problem. And it becomes kind of a whodunit aspect in here, and kind of like a mystery, which I really liked. I think the way that they were able to unfold this movie and make it a lot more interesting was cool. I like the fact that this movie also deals a lot with the traumatic experiences of abuse and the way that they kind of have to heal from that. That was not something I was expecting, but overall, both of these 2 main characters kind of deal with a lot of different mental health issues, and the way that they're able to talk through it with each other and the way that they're able to get back into the dating world is actually kind of inspiring, which is not something I was expecting from this movie. So overall, I enjoyed this way more than I expected it to be. It was ridiculously funny, and I actually would recommend going and watching this movie if you're a fan of horror movies. I think that there is something to enjoy about this, and I do think it is a little special. Alrighty, Alrighty, and coming in second place, we have The Accountant 2. I will say this, I never watched the first Accountant movie, so if this one is a big step down from the original Accountant, I would have no idea whatsoever. But I will say, for what it's worth, I went to see this movie. I think that the action is absolutely fantastic. I think that there's a lot of sequences that aren't necessarily anything new or unique, but like sometimes it's just fun to watch a group of two very muscular men go down a room of people and just take them all out one by one by one. Jon Bernthal is an absolute delight to watch in this movie. I think that his comedic elements in this film is just absolutely phenomenal. Like, he has so many different bits throughout this film that'll have you laughing your ass off. I think one of my favorite moments, not to do a very big spoiler, but when you first see him in this movie, he's on the phone, or it's like, it's a weird scene because it's cutting in between like later and earlier, but he's like talking in the mirror, hyping himself up. He keeps like practicing how he's going to say things, and it kind of like sets up like, oh, is he going on a first date? Because that's what Ben Affleck's character is doing at the beginning of this movie. And it's just like, okay, these are two brothers who are on opposite sides of the world, but are both struggling with finding love. And then you find out the thing that he's been hyping himself up for is talking to a lady who he's adopting a dog from, and he really just wants to hurry up and adopt the dog sooner rather than later, because he really just wants something to love and something to cherish, and he just wants to kind of have something to, you know, come home to at the end of the day. And I think that that's adorable. And I think that something in particular that I really like about Jon Bernthal is in every single role that he plays, he has a different level of positive masculinity that I really like. And in this movie, it's really that loneliness and how it feels good to have a purpose. It feels good to have somebody who wants you around. And the way that they have like the brotherhood bond in this movie is so great. I think that although the action for the most part is kind of middle of the road, even though the plot is very basic, there's a twist in it that is so unsurprising, it's not even funny. But these two brothers and their bond throughout this movie, the comedy throughout this movie, and just the way that they kind of like get this like reconnection that they've really desperately been needing, it's fun. It kind of becomes a road trip movie in the end, and I really, really appreciated that, and I had a good time with it. So that's why it's number 2 on my list. But now those movies are all in a range that I would say okay to good. This next movie might be the movie of the year as of so far. Let's talk about it. And coming in first place, this should be a surprise to literally nobody. We have Ryan Coogler's Sinners. This movie, when I first saw the original trailer for it, and a lot of the rumors were coming out about, like, Marvel's scared to do their Blade movie because there's going to be a movie with Michael B. Jordan and he's going to be a vampire hunter. And then seeing how they were starting off this kind of marketing and making it seem like, okay, these guys are going to be, like, going down, hunting down vampires. It seems really interesting. And what are they going to do with this film? To seeing what it actually is just absolutely phenomenal. I will say I do have a couple of biases. One, historical fiction. I will absolutely eat those up every single time. I think that this period piece is phenomenal. They do such an incredible job showcasing what living in America in the South around this time potentially would have been. I think that the way that they do the costuming, the set design is phenomenal. And something that I particularly really like about this movie compared to other horror movies is that it's really not a horror movie for the first 2 acts. I think that this movie does a really good job of kind of like setting up where everything is going to go down, why everything is going to go down, why there's a bunch of characters in the place that it's going to go down. And they do such an incredible job of like building up the characters so much in the first place that whenever stuff does start going wrong, you really feel the emotional weight of it a lot. And I think that that's incredible. I think that the horror elements in this film work incredibly well because you start off with such like an okay, positive movie and these people having a really good time. And I like the fact that we get an epilogue at the end of this movie that kind of helps us remember that this movie was, for the most part, these people just kind of like living their best lives and getting to like experience like true freedom for a night. And I really like the fact that they were setting up this bar that was going to be this happy place where people can go and they can just like be themselves for a night, and they can enjoy the music, they can enjoy each other's company. And it's just a huge, beautiful celebration of life. And it's so culturally rich, this movie. The music is phenomenal. I absolutely love this film, and I think that it is by far one of the most beautiful things I've seen in my life. I absolutely enjoyed it. I think that every single actor brought their A game here, including the villain. I feel like not enough people have given the villain credit. He was phenomenal in this film. And just overall, so well done. So just captivating. There's literally a sequence that I'm not going to get too far into because I don't want to spoil it for anybody who has not seen this movie, but I cannot stress enough, go watch this movie right now. But the sequence where they do the song I Lied to You literally made me feel like I was levitating in my seat. It was so good, so captivating, and just the way that everything flows from, like I said, I'm not trying to spoil it. So it's basically a one shot, and just everything about it just, that's peak cinema. That is peak cinema. It is so good. And Jesus, Ryan Coogler is the man. He is the man. But yeah, that being said, that was it for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by checking it out. I love and appreciate you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, feel free to like and subscribe, and feel free to leave your list down below. If there's any exciting movies that came out in the month of April that I might have missed, please feel free to let me know as well. But that being said, I'm going to sign out. Peace out. Bow, bow, bow.